I wanted to say thank you to our sponsors, the Buccaneer, St. Thomas and St. Croix Cancer Specialists, Dr. Gary Jett, Fly the Whale, and Sweet Lime Furnishings. So thank you to our sponsors for helping us put together this event. Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you guys for coming out on this Tuesday evening. Thank you for coming out to Why We Left. First, I want to say thank you for the RT Park for hosting this. My name is Jed John Hope, CEO of Yellow Cedar and president of Generation Next. And today we're going to have a discussion with Virgin Islanders here and abroad and talk to them a little bit more about why we left. As you guys know, within the last couple of weeks, there's been sort of a viral conversation started by a former senator that sparked some meaningful discussions about our community. Now, let's begin with some hard truths, right? Over the last decade, we've lost about 20% of our population. We used to have 107,000 people living here, now it's about 87,000. That's not just a number, that's our family, that's our friends, that's our cousins. And we got to face the fact that some of the people that we know and love, and some of the people that made this community what it is, are no longer with us. And the decline wasn't sudden. It was gradual, right? First it was Ovensa, then it was Irma and Maria, then there were the Mercy Cruises after Irma and Maria. No one realized that those Mercy Cruises were one-way. Once those people got to the States, they found employment, they found, for some, what they would consider a better quality of life, and they decided not to come back home. And I can't blame the few that they didn't come back home, because 6 years ago I came back home ready to contribute, and I was met with all sorts of resistance. There were people here that were, in my opinion, that weren't the best for this community, playing defense, trying to keep everybody away from getting involved. So let's talk a little bit more about the hard truths of why people have been leaving the Virgin Islands. I have an esteemed panel of Virgin Islanders with me today, some friends and some new colleagues that live in the States, and we're going to have a discussion and keep the conversation going. Lisa, you're first up. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Jed. I'm honored to be on this call and share. As a Virgin Islander, I was born in New York, but raised in St. Croix. I've had several businesses, and two of my brothers and sisters were born in St. Croix. I went to Good Hope, and I love my island. And as we'll share with us, we'll talk about why we left.
Next up, we have Dexter Hippolyte, who was an engineer with WAPA and left within the last few years to seek employment in Texas. Dexter?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dexter Hippolyte. I was born also in the Virgin Islands on the island of St. Croix. I graduated from the St. Croix Educational Complex, and after that attended the University of the Virgin Islands. I was one of the lucky Virgin Islanders that received the 2006 Alva McFarland Scholarship, where I studied electrical engineering. So I got my bachelor's in New York at Columbia University, and I was that fortunate Virgin Islander who had a job immediately home. So I worked at the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority. I worked for basically 10 years, and at that point, I reached a point in my career where I kind of wanted to see more and wanted to test overseas. So I decided to apply and got a job offer to consult.
Next up, we have Anna Watt.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Anna Watt here from sunny Florida. I originally born and raised in St. Croix. I went to Alexander Henderson and then moved on to Good Hope School, where I graduated. And then after that, I moved to the States for college, studied mechanical engineering at the University of Virginia. Shortly after that, moved to Florida. I started working for Verizon and have been there ever since and have loved it. I also love home. Home will always be home. I visit at least 4 or 5 times a year. I've debated this topic with a lot of my circle of friends in terms of how can we move back? When can we move back? How can we make money if we move back? It's a topic of heated debate and conversation. We all have different ideas. I'm really looking forward to hearing, what comes out of this because I think, there are a lot of, uh, you know, people in my similar situation that really would love to be back home, right? But it's just that transition and how do you continue, you know, uh, progressing and having a decent living, right? So and supporting your family. So looking forward to the conversation.
Next up, we have Rebecca Best. Rebecca?
Hi, good evening. Tough act to follow with all of the other panelists. I do believe that I am the only person representing St. Thomas on the panel thus far. So I have a lot to live up to at this point. First of all, thank you so much, Jed, and to the other panelists for participating in this and bringing this forum to fruition. Again, my name is Rebecca Best. I come from the island of St. Thomas. I am a Charlotte O'Malley graduate. Go Chicken Hawks. I did leave the island for higher education, and I've been trying to get back just about ever since. While I've been in the States, I've primarily worked with or in policy writing in multiple states. And such notable topics as Medicaid and medical marijuana and vouchers for SNAP, that sort of thing. So I help write the policies that inform how those programs are distributed in the various states. Or I did until a couple of years ago when I transitioned fields to emergency management right after Irma and Maria.
How are you doing, Kareem? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm good. Hi, I'm Kareem from the Virgin Islands. I was born and raised in St. Croix. Left from educational complex to come to the States due to various reasons that we're going to get into. But went to New England Tech for a few years, got my degree in automotive. Went to SCC in Florida and got my drafting and designing degree, and been up in the States ever since. Moved to Orlando, Florida. I work for GM, a GM dealer, and I'm a master tech there. I also own my own cleaning business, and that's basically me in a nutshell.
Well, thanks, Kareem, for sharing that. And what is your analysis of the kind of state of affairs of St. Croix and the Virgin Islands at large?
I think that over the years, what I've seen is things has been going down more and more, from the police department to education to, how the island is just going down over and over every time I go home. I have thought of coming home and opening a business a couple of times, but every time I go home, it's changed for the worse every single time I went home. I've not seen any growth on the Virgin Islands, which is pretty sad because my whole family is from the Virgin Islands. I've seen too many killing, too many deaths in the past few years, and I have a daughter, I have a wife, so raising my kid down there, unfortunately, is not something I would want to do. You know what I mean? But I love my island, and I would love to one day bring my daughter back home so she could enjoy what I once used to call home.
Thank you for sharing that. And I would also like to mention that Kareem is great-grandson or grandson of David Hamilton Jackson, the labor leader from St. Croix. Would anybody else like to chime in on that? What's it like when you're visiting, as you read and keep in touch with the news from afar? What's your analysis of what's going on in St. Croix or in St. Thomas or in St. John.
So I'll be happy to jump in. I myself frequent the Virgin Islands a lot. I come down. I was just there for Carnival. I've been to the Virgin Islands, lived the Virgin Islands, love the Virgin Islands. I've been back twice to open a business, twice. I'm going to try a third time, Jed. Hopefully this session does something and convinces me to come back. But we'll talk more about that. But most people's perception, I live in Atlanta, most people's perception of the Virgin Islands is paradise. It just depends what lens you look through. You know, all cities, all areas have issues. City of Atlanta has plenty of issues. Nepotism, it's got crime, it's got politics, it's got corruption. It's just like any place else. The challenge is we love our island so much that we care so much, and all that noise and what's happening makes us feel away. But the average person, when you say you're from the Virgin Islands, they're like, oh my God, I love it. I visited, I had a great time. But they never stay long enough to be a Virgin Islander.
All right. So I don't visit home as much as some of the other panelists. For quite a few years in a row, I didn't visit at all. So my perspective comes from what used to be there? Oh, this used to be there. That used to be there. And I was like, when I come back, so many things that I remember, so many things that I was fond of, so many businesses that I could never imagine living without are no longer there. And what's worse still is that they haven't been replaced with something else. There's just a vacancy. And so I'm bringing my family and my friends and my loved ones from up here home to try to express to them what was so wonderful about growing up in St. Thomas, what was so wonderful about being a Tonian. Why do I have so much pride? But when I get down there to show off what existed in my head, what I know is supposed to be there, I get there and there's nothing there. Primarily another issue that really touched home for me is I recently had 2 little ones. And up here, we are constantly on the go doing child appropriate things, right? Even if that means just going to a local park. And when I took my littles home the last time, there wasn't a park that didn't have, overgrown bushes, or the swinging broke, or, there wasn't some exposed metal. I don't want them to scratch up themselves. You know what I mean? There wasn't an environment, a safe environment where that was well upkept that I could take my children to. They didn't have space that was specific and uniquely designed for them.
So I too I love the Virgin Islands, and even up in the States, sometimes we get asked the question, like in team building, where's your favorite place to visit? And frankly, I've said the U.S. Virgin Islands. All the time I've said that. And I recently went for December. I went in December, January, and I went in February. And yes, it's tough because it's 4 tickets that has to be purchased. So that's one of the things that a lot of us from away have to experience. We have to experience that high ticket cost.
If you were to go back and talk to your 18-year-old self, what sort of advice would you give them on whether to stay in the Virgin Islands or leave and thrive as you have done?
And I think going away to get an education and coming back to, help out is the way to go if you want to go that route, if you want to move back home.
There's lots of opportunities right now. Not everybody's going to go to college, but our young people have nothing to grasp or nothing to aspire for. They want to get off the island as soon as they're 18. There's nothing to keep them unless, they stay local and they love their island, or maybe they got a good scholarship to go to the University of the Virgin Islands.
What would I tell my 18-year-old self? Honestly, it's, Lisa mentioned it. Once you graduate, yes, you have the University of Virgin Islands, but your options are limited. I think if we expanded education, help the education system, I think we got to start there. There's many layers to this problem, and I think education, any strong economy starts off with a good, solid education because you're reinvesting in your younger generation who can then bring better ideas and hopefully stay and, like you said, open up those businesses.
So if you were to give advice to the governor or the senators, anybody, any of our decision makers, what would you tell them they should be doing or trying to do to attract more Virgin Islanders to come back home?
How much time do we have?
Honestly, incentivize. It built incentives. We were chit-chatting, as you said, this conversation really took flight. And so we were having these conversations on social media. We were having them in our households. We were having them, I personally was having them with my Yankee friends. Hey, like what would make me, feel comfortable moving back home? And it really boils down to incentives.
We have 15 senators. That's like, you can't even talk that language to people in the United States, because if we had 15 senators doing their job, all of them collectively would be in a better place. So we need to limit that number. That's the first thing we need to do, limit the number. Then we have companies like EDC that bring companies in. We have local companies, like Rebecca was saying, called Invest in St. Croix.
How does the government get Virgin Islanders like yourself, talented Virgin Islanders, back home?
They gotta stop putting all the roadblocks to open business. Every time you try to open a business, there's a roadblock.
We still have to talk about the lifestyle and living in the Virgin Islands that every single island experiences. So I'm gonna touch on the utilities. So touching base on that, as you know, the quickest way to trickle down an economy is gas prices.
All right, I'm gonna ask one more question, and we're gonna open it up to the audience for some Q&A. We'll try to end on a positive note, so you guys help me out here a little bit. What do you miss most about the Virgin Islands? And do you ever see yourself coming back home?
What I miss most is people, family, right? Of course. The beach, the beautiful, beautiful beach and water.
The thing I miss most about St. Thomas is the cookie frog. The cookie in the night. The most soothing sound you've ever heard in your life. And that is genuinely what I miss the most. All of my relatives and friends know if I am in a funk, you send me a recording of the cookie frog, and that's going to cheer me up. So that is literally what I would miss the most.
I love the beaches. I love the bush tea. I love the saltfish pate. I love my conch and butter sauce. I love my people. I love the Crucian rum. I love the sand. I love the carnivals. I love everything there's to love about the Virgin Islands, except the basic living in the Virgin Islands.
All right, well, I want to open it up to the audience here. What's on you guys' mind? I know there's been a lot of conversations over the last 2 weeks online. What are your thoughts here in the room?
I think the panel was fabulous meeting on my field, and it's been just a pleasure to hear everybody's perspective. My partner and I have been living here for 8 years now, and we're going through the same issues that people have gone through that grew up here and left. How to bring people back is a question that is the same as how do we create a healthy and vibrant community. And I think that we distract ourselves when we talk about the question of should it be incentives to bring us back or not. Even though you asked about incentives and we heard people say, oh, it'd be great if we got a quarter-acre land or we got this. I didn't sense from everybody speaking that that's really what's holding them back. What's holding them back are the fundamental flaws in our community. What's holding us all back are the fundamental flaws in our community. And I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few weeks especially, and I'm kind of angry about it. I think a lot of people are angry about it because we feel these flaws all the time. And there's some of the flaws that we can't do anything about. And so when we hear our governor talk about it, and he's like, hey, we're trying to solve this, we're trying to solve that. I get it. There's some big problems that are going to take a lot of time. And we hear one of the panelists who says, gosh, I wish gas prices were lower, or I wish utility prices were lower, or I wish food prices were lower. Like all those things are things that we want that probably aren't going to change anytime soon. That's part of being far away from the United States and having extra transportation costs and being a small community and not having that like big market share that you get stateside. But then there's the things that we can change. And those are the things that I'm hearing people say like, gosh, we can do things today, not tomorrow. We can have the attitude of we want to change this. We can have a government that cares about it. When I think about like ball field and Frederick said, the stadium being built, we squandered $30 million on right now.
You mean the most expensive stadium in the history of the United States?
Not the most expensive by any stretch of the imagination, but the most expensive little couple of concrete walls, not much else in the history of the United States, right? Because it's not that big a deal and done. But that's not the issue. The issue is that for 16 years, the two ball fields that were there haven't been there for the kids in the community. And that's the part where I'm like, that's a tomorrow, not today thing. And those issues pile up in our community and aren't addressed by government. It's when you've got to go licensing every day for 3 weeks to get your license, and that doesn't happen. Those are the things that we can change. And those are the things that I'm mad at our governor and our government for not fixing for us, not helping us with. And it's what I actually wish that these people would come home and help us fix. What I think all of us need to fix, because if we all work together, those are the things we can change. And if we would do the things we can change, we would have enough going to the Virgin Islands that it would be a welcoming place for all of us and people would want to be here. And we wouldn't see people fleeing as often. Yeah, there's still going to be issues with medical care, there's still going to be issues with utilities, but these are things we can chip away at while we do fix the things that we can change. And if we can do those, I think we'll come a long way.
I really feel, I've been there for 16 years now, and I like a lot of things about St. Croix. I really love doing things about St. Croix. I think St. Croix is good for certain people at certain times in their life, so to speak. But I find the most fatal flaw that I really have never been able to understand since the day I got here is why is CTEC, the College for Technical Training, not emphasized more with the young people? I'm from Chicago. DeVry is a big booming technical college in Chicago. It was down here for a while and abandoned for whatever reason I'm not quite sure about. And I know the people over at CTEC. I know Anton Dukes is the executive director. I think he shares my opinion. The educational system puts their money into education. Well, in my opinion, not everyone wants to be an attorney. Not everyone wants to be a doctor. But these kids down here, they know how to fix a car. They know how to fix a toilet by the time they're 12, 15 years old. And that type of skill is not extrapolated on them in the educational system. I think there's too little money that is put into CTEC. It's a great school. You have all kinds of classes, all kinds of vocations that the kids can get into. Everybody says there's a manpower shortage. We got billions of dollars in this. We don't have enough money to fulfill the jobs that the programs that we have coming down from the federal government. Well, we're not educating the young kids to come in and take over those jobs. Those young kids don't particularly understand being a businessman, but they understand how to fix something. They understand how to be a welder. They understand technical things, and that's the way they were raised here on the island. And that's the great thing about it. But we're not taking advantage of them through the educational system, in my opinion.
I've been here tonight and I've listened to some of the panelists and we've been members of the audience talk about education and what our kids are like. And one thing I can say is they don't understand finances, okay? When it comes to simple terms like equity or how to use their credit, they're at a loss for it. So now that leaves you with no point or no other avenue but to go into the work system, into the workforce. You know, when you want to be or are supposed to be an entrepreneur. You know, there are a lot of programs, whether it be SBA loans or USDA, plethora of avenues that our young people could take advantage of. And this, I don't know if it's just not a part of the criteria in the schools, but you know, I think it should be. Financial education is where it's at, and we need to start it.
Yeah, good evening. Mary Moorhead, and full disclosure, I'm a member of the Board of Education. I really came to listen tonight, looking answers, but it struck at me because, I mean, I was in the position that you people are describing now back in the 70s. But the difference was that my generation, we came and we fought. We didn't stay silent. We didn't, just be disgusted and leave some or whatever. We did what we could to fight, to change. And those of you who maybe grew up in households who can remember the 70s with all the different job actions and things like that sort, you would understand the fight. When I have a problem that I'm not seeing young people fighting. I mean, not even talking, you're quiet. I go to every single PTA of public schools that I hear about. And the not the one before Gen Z, I'm not with this too. Yeah, those are the majority of the parents now, okay? They don't go to PTAs. That's the first problem. And if they do go to PTAs, there's nothing that they speak about with academics. And when I bring up academics, everyone's upset. So how do you change things if you're going to be quiet and not try to fight? I tell people all the time, I'm going to fight until they cremate me. Where education is concerned, because, and I heard somebody say tonight, that's the foundation. That's what has to change. We have smart, very intelligent children. And I tell people all the time, I'm not ashamed to say it, the system dumbed them down. I will say it any place, because I've seen it. I'm 30 years in the system as a secondary teacher, and now on the board of it, because that was my plan, to keep fighting for education. But you have to, whether you have children or not, you have to fight. And you have to speak up even with the issues that you have. You complain, but you don't complain publicly. To force, because I'm going to tell you, this government has to be shamed into change. So whenever I go any place and I have a problem, I talk about it. I talk about it to the person I have a problem with, trying to educate them to what is wrong and what should be different. Like when I go to McDonald's, they come to the window, $11. I say, excuse me, could you please repeat my order before you tell me the amount so I can know that the order was properly communicated? Okay? And I do most times meet some young people who appreciate that and will just do what I, because they realize I'm saying this, but we cannot be quiet. If things are going to change, then everyone is going to have to say something to try to make the change happen, whatever area you're in, because that's how the politics is in charge, controlling, and really regressing. Because I lived a great life in the 70s. We had places to go, things to do, every night if we wanted to. I think you should recall that. Okay? and it can happen again. But people have to do something to make the change.
I have a son that's in his 30s, and he went away to school. He came back, or stayed away for a while, came back, and is leaving again. Part of the reason is he has a young child now, and just the quality of life that we have here now is part of his reason. Even the ability to, let me double back. Their mentality is different, where he says to me, I'm not gonna slave for anyone like you are, your age group. That's what work for someone. No, I'm gonna work for myself. Even though it can be a struggle. But basically their mentality is different. There isn't a real social life here in terms of things to do. And that's part of the reason. Even looking in the government for a job, you have vacancies, you required a bachelor's degree, but you want to pay $40,000 to start. It's not going to happen. And that's part of the reason. They want to be paid for their work. And basically the quality of life. And it's totally different from when I grew up. When I grew up, we knew that we could go to, we had a summer job. We knew we had summer jobs. Times are different. They think differently, and the quality of life is not the best right now.
So I am technically Gen Z. I was actually working on a PhD at UNC Chapel Hill back in between 2020, 2021, moved back home. And I agree with a lot of what you said. I always tell people St. Croix is a retirement community, unfortunately. For young people, there's not a lot for us to do. But for me, I can't wait for somebody else to come here and make something for me. So at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that things are going to be tough and it's going to be difficult, but sometimes you have to sacrifice certain things to accomplish something in the future. I think it's also twofold, because if I didn't work for the company that I work for now, I wouldn't be here. If I didn't have a job at the RT Park, I would not be here. So I think private sector is the answer. I know there are a lot of Virgin Islanders who live abroad who have multi-million-dollar companies and companies that generate a lot of revenue. So we need to find ways to attract those companies to come back and then offer job opportunities to Virgin Islanders. I think we can't depend on somebody else to answer the questions for us. And if we continue to do that, we're going to lose our place in what is our home. So we got to ask ourselves what's important and how are we going to, accomplish the things that we say we want and the things that we need.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lakia, and I'm around about the same generation as Tahira, but we won't specify. Everyone's path looks different. Everyone's reality looks different. How they were brought up, the circumstances. For me, I was a young mom. I didn't get or take the opportunity to go to college, etc. I was a mom first and last. And so with that, simple things like getting government assistance and getting the runaround for government assistance, or the inconveniences. Sometimes it would take months to hear back from them. Meanwhile, me and my children have to survive. I don't have the higher education to get a job that I know maybe I'm intellectually qualified for, but paper-wise, I didn't have the opportunity to go get the degree for it, right? And so the stress that is caused on the people in the community to acquire simple things. It adds to the mental illness that happens here. Poverty is very, very intertwined in mental illness. And so when you have this added stress of completing a simple task, it makes people want to run away. It makes you want to leave, And I love home. I grew up in Houston for a little while, came back home, moved away as a young adult, came back home, moved away again, came back home. And no matter what, I always come back home. I'm gonna always come back home. I love my home, just the quality of life, and quality of life is really dependent on the person. I value the beach, I value the breeze, I value the people, I value the small community. If I my children walking down the street, somebody gonna call me and be like, hey, I just see as I going down such and such. In the States, there's no accountability in that way. I love my home, but you also have to choose your stress factors. A young mom raising young boys, those are already stress factors in itself. And then to deal with government officials or government employees who are telling you, well, you need to give me a minute, or just having a bad attitude, probably because they're dealing with the same economy that I am. It's painful to be here a lot of times, and just to touch on another perspective, we have had a lot of domestic violence situations, especially as of late. I don't know, who all has, I don't know if, you guys have recently heard about the young lady that just got shot and killed in St. Thomas. By the way, Rebecca, you're not alone. Charlotte Amali, graduate here. I'm from St. Thomas originally.
I recognize the voice. I know exactly who you is, and I can't see you. I know who you is.
Domestic violence is a major factor amongst our community, whether we speak about it or we don't speak about it. It's a factor. And not just amongst ours, I'm not singling us out, but it's a major factor nonetheless. And in our economy, a lot of women and men, a lot of victims of domestic violence are forced into situations where they have to couple with a person that may not be safe because they cannot afford to step out on their own. At least not here. They have to, if they're gonna leave the situation, they have to leave somewhere where the rent is not $2,500 for a decent one-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood where their children can go outside and play and they feel safe about it. There's just this, the economic state and the social state of our economy makes it really difficult to be here and want to stay or to come back. And so I would love to discuss solutions and what that looks like. And a lot of people spoke about incentives, but before we can talk about the incentives and the additional promises, I think we should figure out a way to fulfill the basic promises, like getting our income tax back, like getting the contracts the RFPs that get put out and somebody goes and fulfills the order, and then it takes 20 years to get paid for that job that you already dispensed money. You paid employees out of your pocket. You know what I mean? And you're not getting that money back from the government in an efficient amount of time. So by the time you do get it back, you're done in debt with that money. So the basic promises first, then we could talk about incentives, and how do we shift the mindset of the people? I love starting with the kids. Let's put in some mindfulness exercises in the schools. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's really shift the health and wellness mindset so that we can start to be more go-getters and I love how Lisa, she doesn't take no for an answer. I could see that in her. She shifted her mindset with all of these wellness books and the education that she gave herself But in such a small community, we should infuse that education in our children so that, they grow with it. So that's my 2 cents.
The Virgin Islands, St. Croix, love to say, oh, Tim Duncan came out of here, We got the Tim Duncan Foundation, we got all of that good stuff, which is so good to have and so good to talk about. We have several Virgin Islanders that are off island that are very successful. We have Virgin Islanders that are on island that are very successful. I think that we need to make more Tim Duncans. We have so much young men in the communities that can be probably Tim Duncan times 25, but we're not going to see that potential unless we come together and push them. It's all a community effort. One hand cannot clap. So now, if we all come together and say, you know what, we really don't like the state that we are living in. We don't like the state that our children are living in. We want better for ourselves. We want a future where we can stand up upright and be happy wherever we are, whether we are off or on island. So, in short, we need to come together. We need to be a community. We need to operate like we just got hit from a Category 11 hurricane, and we need to survive with each other to make it. And then that's when we're gonna see the change. And it needs to be consistent. It can't be, okay, gonna do this for a month. Oh my gosh, I'm tired. I want to watch TV. I want to watch Netflix. No. True change comes from determination and consistency. And without that, we will never reach where we need to reach. We are living history. We need to create more history and stop dwelling on what was and what we can maintain and create more and add to what we're maintaining.
We are the government. The government is my neighbor and my auntie and my grandfather. Yeah, and it's like we have to hold ourselves accountable so that change can happen in the Virgin Islands. And if we want something to happen at the end of the day, we have to do it ourselves. And if we want people to come back like Lisa and Dexter, we have to give them a reason to come back and encourage them and be the example. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's cliche, but it really does start with us.
I've left the Virgin Islands twice myself. That was primarily focused on education, getting a higher degree, and more financial opportunities in the States. But I really want to talk about my mother, who lived and worked. She was a teacher education, and she left the Virgin Islands in her late 60s out of necessity for healthcare. So believe it or not, the Virgin Islands government has great insurance, but we don't have any facilities on island that could help my mother. So after dealing with a couple incidents here on island, our family took it upon ourselves to move my mother to the States so she could get the help that she needed, right? And as soon as she arrived in the States, they didn't let her leave the hospital for 3 weeks. So it's crazy that while she was living here, she was just kind of going about her business. She'd go to Juan Louis, they'd check her vitals, and they'd send her right back home. But we literally did not have that access to the healthcare that my mother needed to survive. So my mom came up with me and she lived with me for all of 2017. And I'm actually glad, because if she had been here when the storms had happened, it would not have went well. So we had a good time. We take road trips, we go see family. We had a blast. She enjoyed living in the States for what it was. But my mother was a born and bred Crucian. My mother is one of the people that would barely leave Frederickstead. She'd go to Christiansted once or twice a year to go to the lieutenant governor's office, to go to Brady's, but then she's going right back to Frederickstead, right? So she never wanted to live in the States. And after a while, my mother was like, I gotta go back home, right? And I'm like, Mom, you do not have any sort of access to healthcare in the Virgin Islands. But at that point in my mother's life, she was less concerned about access to quality healthcare, and she was more concerned about her access to quality kalaloo. So she wanted to move back, and she fought me tooth and nail to move back. And predictably, after a while, she passed. But she passed how she wanted to pass, on St. Croix, living a life that she wanted to live. And I can't tell anybody else. I know all. So thank you, everybody on the panel, for sharing your stories with us. I personally would love to see each and every one of you guys come back home because I'm selfish. But right now, kind of echoing to Hera's sentiments, I'm thinking, all right, it's not about the Virgin Islands not doing enough for me. I'm trying to figure out what else can I do for the Virgin Islands, because I can't get vexed at the gentrification if I'm not willing to stand up and claim the land myself, right? I can't get vexed with the poor decisions being made if I'm not willing to take a seat at the table and fight for better decisions to be made. So that's kind of what I hope I can leave everybody with tonight is, how can we help the Virgin Islands? We can't get vexed with the politicians because we elected them. And if you're not happy with the politicians, you can become a politician yourself, right? This place is so small and so fragile and so beautiful. I do not want to lose it. So please, we need the help. We can't have everybody leave. I want all of you guys to come back. And I hope you can join us for the next discussion, why we stayed. Because believe it or not, a lot of us are still here.